Peter Bofinger says it is in Germany's genuine interest to lower, quote, this whole debt mountain. Well, his opinion matters because Bofinger is one of the so-called five wise men, the Council of Economic Advisor to German Chancellor Angela Merkel and to the country's parliament. Last week, the economics professor said the interest rate on Greece's bailout loans is punitive, and the failure to lower it means that politics have failed to, quote, get a head start over the markets. Well, Peter Bofinger joins us now live from Munich. Thank you so much for being on the show. I wanted to get, first of all, a reaction of what's happening today, because you're absolutely right when you say that we have failed so far to put the crisis behind us. In fact, every day it seems that it just gets more murky and we don't really know where to hit our head next. How concerned are you by the latest talk about Greece possibly not getting their second tranche from the IMF?
Well, we see that we are in a kind of vicious circle where countries are trying to improve their macroeconomic situation, but while demand goes down, it's very difficult to cut the deficits. And this now also makes it difficult for the IMF to provide the money. But of course, one has to ask whether the IMF's forecasts were really realistic when they assumed that it would be possible for Greece to become market access already in 2012. So I think that was overly optimistic, and possibly also the forecasts for revenues of the government in Greece were too optimistic. And I think that's the question now. Is this a failure of the Greek government or is it a failure of the IMF?
Of the targets. But what does it mean? What do you think that Germany sees as the best way out of this when Greece so obviously missed most targets?
Well, I think first of all, one should ask what went wrong in Greece. Simply stating that the deficit targets were not met is not sufficient, because the government cannot control the revenues directly. What they can do, they can change the tax law, they can change the tax administration. And the question is, was there something wrong with the things the government tried to change? The mere result that the revenues are not high enough is nothing the government should be blamed with.
But so what does Germany want as a practical solution? Martin Feldstein, for example, suggested that a temporary exit may be a way out. Has that option been discussed?
Well, I think we have three very unpleasant scenarios. One is a debt restructuring for Greece. And the problem, in my view, is, of course, that there are contagion risks to other countries. There are problems for the banking system. But that does not mean that debt reduction is the wrong way. It only means that you cannot do it in an isolated way for Greece. You need a comprehensive solution that includes Spain, Ireland, and Portugal, so that you don't have these contagion effects. So debt restructuring really is a big operation, but I think it's worth it. The other alternative is just some countries leaving the Eurozone. Giving up the euro as their currency, but I think that's equally or even more dangerous, because it could lead to a kind of chain reactions. So if Greece gets out, I think there will be discussion in Ireland and Spain or Portugal why they should not also go out. And then the question is, where will that stop?
But how can we talk about a restructuring if the ECB won't even contemplate or talk about a reprofiling?
Well, I think the ECB might have to consider its position, because if we just do nothing, if we just let the debt pile up, a risk could be that more and more debt is piling up in the ECB's balance sheet, because more or less the ECB is the lender of last resort, and if the rescue mechanisms, the FSF or the ESM, are not sufficient and cannot be extended sufficiently, in the end it will be the ECB who has to buy up all the bonds, and I think that's not something the ECB might want.
All right, now let's suppose that actually the IMF is not going to pay out the next tranche. Will the EU have to step in and pay for the IMF, and what should Angela Merkel tell her public to get them on board?
Well, definitively one cannot allow Greece to become insolvent. I think that's absolutely not an option, and therefore I assume that if the IMF is not willing to continue its financing, that the EU will do the job. I think there's no doubt.
And what can Angela Merkel do? You know, she's been under a lot of criticism for going back on certain promises. She has a difficult situation at home also with her own public. Is it fair to say that she's had some fairly contradictory statements?
Well, I think the main problem is that she was criticizing people in Greece for not working enough, for having too many holidays. And this is something which is not very helpful in a situation where you have to convince your domestic electorate that you have to pay more for this country. I think that's definitively was not a very, very helpful remark.
But so what does it mean exactly that she's trying to buy time until 2013, until the ESM actually kicks in? And does it actually mean that in 12 months from now, we'll be asking ourselves exactly the same questions as now, to restructure or to reprofile, or what can we do going forward?
I think 2013 is far away. The problems we are facing are the problems in the next few months, and I think the problems will be there and they might increase, and that's why I think we need bold solutions. We have to ask how we can really find comprehensive approaches to deal with the crisis. I think that the current approach is kind of wait-and-see approach, is the idea that one can buy time. This will not succeed, and with this approach we won't reach 2013.
And do you think that this is something that the EU politicians and Angela Merkel understand?
I think they understand it, but the problem is they lack the political will for a really bold solution which is required. So with small solutions you really can make things worse, and I think that's the problem, that there's not enough cooperation, there's not the will to go forward. There's also maybe the fear of the domestic electorate, but all this hesitation in the end will lead to solutions that are much worse than a grand solution right now.
And we talk also about this possible Vienna-style program, so actually asking the banks and bondholders to keep in some sort the bonds after the maturities end. But of course everyone has to agree to this. How feasible is this?
Well, I think my approach would be more kind of Brady bond approach, that one offers an exchange of Greek bonds against EU bonds, Euro bonds. I think that's something that would be helpful, and I think it would be also good for the banks, because they get then AAA bonds instead of bonds that are not very well rated. It could be also helpful for Greece if these Euro bonds have very low interest rates. So in my view, one sooner or later will have to come to the Euro bonds. I think there's definitively no alternative to this instrument, and it would really improve the situation considerably.
Yeah, Peter, thank you so much. Peter Bofinger there.